Athelstan is often regarded as the first king of the English. This was made possible not only by Athelstan's own actions, but also by the vital contributions made by his father, Edward the Elder, and grandfather, Alfred the Great. Despite being a notably pious man, Athelstan remained unmarried and with no children. He was a king well and truly capable of ruling by the sword. Athelstan was raised by the right people to help him in that regard. During his youth, Athelstan's education was overseen by his aunt, Athelfled, Lady of the Mercians, who herself helped oversee the reconquest of significant amounts of English territory from the grasp of the Vikings. The achievements of his grandfather, Alfred, are well known in the shape of his little grandson, aged no older than 5 at the time. Alfred saw greatness in Athelstan and presented him with a magnificent sword and belt. Alfred had helped rear his son and Athelstan's father, Edward the Elder, in readiness for a lifetime of campaigning, and here he made a small contribution to the generation that would follow Edward. There were some question marks over Athelstan's succession in 924, and he was not crowned until the following year. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles declares that Athelstan was chosen king by the Mercians. It's possible that Edward the Elder intended for another of his sons, Alfred, to succeed as king of Wessex. It's perhaps significant that Athelstan was educated in Mercia with the intention that he would succeed there one day, whilst Alfred took Wessex. If that was indeed Edward's plan, then it went awry not long after his death. Alfred died just over a fortnight after his father. After a while, Athelstan eventually secured the acceptance of the men of Wessex, and he was finally crowned in September 925. Athelstan was 30 when he came to the throne, and would have learned much from his father. The much later chronicler John of Worcester wrote of Edward the Elder. Edward, surnamed the Elder, inferior to his father, Alfred, in the practice of letters, but his equal in dignity and power, and his superior in glory. Edward enlarged the confines of his realm much more widely than his father, inasmuch as he built many towns and cities. Edward wrested from Danish hands the whole of Essex, East Anglia, Northumbria, and also many areas of Mercia, which the Danes had long held. He received the submission of all the kings of Scots, the Cumbrians, the people of Strathclyde, and the West Welsh, when he had conquered and slain many kings and leaders in battle. Such was the time Athelstan lived in. Danish occupiers threatened the peace and stability of Athelstan's realm, and other troublesome neighbours would have to be monitored closely also. Edward the Elder and Alfred the Great had shown themselves to be true warrior kings. Now the time had come for Athelstan to do the same. However, being a warrior king didn't necessarily mean endless warfare, and Athelstan knew this. Diplomacy, from time to time, could be a very useful tool, even in these troubled years. In 926, Athelstan arranged a marriage alliance with the Danish king of Northumbria, Sihtric. Sihtric married Athelstan's sister Edith, but the marriage did not last long. Sihtric died in 927, and Athelstan didn't hesitate to act. The marriage alliance had given him the perfect excuse to claim Northumbria and bring it under his control. Athelstan marched north, swept through Northumbria, and drove Sihtric's successor, Guthrith, out. It was a brilliant maneuver from Athelstan, and his growing power did not go unnoticed. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles says, Athelstan succeeded to the kingdom of Northumbria, and he governed all the kings who were in this island. First, Hywel, king of the West Welsh, and Constantine, king of Scots, and Owen, king of Gwent, and Eldred from Bamborough. These kings, perhaps somewhat in awe of the mighty Athelstan, came to him eager to make peace. It's suggested by some chroniclers that these peace agreements had come about after Athelstan had brutally defeated his enemies in battle, although these reports were written much later on. These peace agreements would not last forever in the fast moving world of 10th century kingship, and Athelstan would have particular problems with the King of Scots, Constantine II, in the coming years. Athelstan was a king always on his guard, and he was prepared for rebellions and threats to his power. It was the Welsh who would give him his next headache, with William of Malmesbury describing what happened. Athelstan compelled the rulers of the northern Welsh to meet him at the city of Hereford, and, after some opposition, to surrender to his power. Athelstan further demonstrated his ever growing authority over the neighbouring kingdoms by extracting a huge tribute from the Welsh. William of Malmesbury also claims that Athelstan, after dealing with the Welsh, remained in the southwest and drove the Western Britons out of Exeter, which, in the words of William, they had inhabited till that time with the same privileges as the Anglo Saxons, significantly reducing the territory they now occupied. Athelstan, according to William, then significantly strengthened Exeter's fortifications. However, modern historian Sarah Foote believes the story of Athelstan and Exeter has little credibility, pointing out a number of holes in William's account. Stories of Athelstan's growing prestige and power was not restricted to the British Isles. His flourishing reputation was known far and wide. King Harold Fairhair of Norway sent to Athelstan a beautiful ship with a golden figurehead and bright purple sail. The great German king Henry the Fowler proposed a marriage for Athelstan's sister, another Edith, but not the same one who married Sihtric, to his son Otto, who will be known to history as Otto the Great. The marriage between Edith and Otto took place in 930. Such then was Athelstan's growing stature as king. But away from the glamorous European political stage that Athelstan had now put himself at the forefront of, he still had to be on his guard at home. In 934, he marched into Scotland with a sizable land army that was escorted by a fleet. The motives for Athelstan's expedition is not entirely certain, but it is probable that Constantine II had in some way broken the promises that he had made to Athelstan, and judging by the energy with which Athelstan launched his campaign, it seems that he considered the threat to be a significant one. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles says that Athelstan raided across much of Scotland, and given that he brought forces by both land and sea, his army must have been a comparatively large one, which would have inflicted great damage on Constantine's realm. Constantine, however, was not a problem that would simply go away. Realizing he'd never be able to defeat Athelstan without support, Constantine turned to the King of Dublin, Olaf Guthrum, whose father, Guthrith, had been driven out of Northumbria in 927 by Athelstan. Olaf hoped to reclaim the northern kingdom, and so an alliance with Constantine made perfect sense. Along with Owen, King of Strathclyde, Constantine and Olaf waged war on Athelstan. In 937, the Allied forces joined battle with Athelstan at Brunnan Burh. Defeat here could spell the end of the Kingdom of England that had begun to take shape both during Athelstan's reign and that of Edward the Elder. Should Constantine and Olaf triumph, then potentially not only Northumbria, but the rest of England may have fallen under their control. However, Athelstan, a king of such might and brilliance, was not to be defeated. Never had there been such a greater slaughter in battle as was seen at Brunnan Burh. Constantine, aged in his late 50s, and described as aged by the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, was forced to flee for his life, and according to the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, he had to leave his son behind as he ensured his own escape. Olaf and his men, greatly reduced in numbers, were driven back to their ships, desperate to seek the refuge of Dublin. Olaf would, one day, in the not too distant future, return to England, but, tellingly, only after the death of Aethelstan. Brunanburh is surely the most important battle in English history, given its context and the potential ramifications. What is remarkable is the fact that the site of the battle, despite continuing efforts, remains unidentified. Various locations have been suggested, and we can only hope the mystery will one day be solved. So, what of Athelstan, the victor at Brunanburh? He was a mild man to those who knew him, charitable and humble. Even during his remarkable exploits, he never lost sight of his piety. Before his campaign in Scotland in 934, he stopped to pray at the tomb of St. Cuthbert before unleashing his devastating vengeance on the Scots. Gentle to those loyal to him, terrible to those who became his enemy, Athelstan stands at the very top of great English monarchs, with only his father, Edward the Elder, and grandfather, Alfred the Great, fit to be ranked alongside him.